At 6, the Labour leader, Sir KEIR Starmer, promises to set out a serious plan for government in his speech at the party's conference in Brighton. It's the first time he has been able to address the Labour members in person. He told them he would clear up the mess of the Conservatives.
In a few short years from now, I want to be here with you, talking about the difference we're making, the problems we're fixing as a Labour government.
Sir KEIR was given a standing ovation and also faced down hecklers during his speech. We'll have reaction from voters. Also tonight, a court hears how a police officer pretended to arrest Sarah Everard before kidnapping, raping and murdering her in March. Caught on CCTV just before Wayne Couzens handcuffed her and drove her away. Sarah Everard's parents tell the court they are tormented by what he did to their daughter. Long queues remain, but there are more signs that the fuel situation is continuing to ease across Britain. And the first black head teacher in Wales. A statue is unveiled in Cardiff in honour of Betty Campbell, who championed equality and diversity.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, European football comes to Old Trafford as under pressure Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Manchester United host Villarreal in the Champions League.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Labour leader, Sir KEIR Starmer, has promised that Labour will never again go into an election without a serious plan for government. He told his party conference in Brighton that the country faced a big moment that demands leadership and that as Prime Minister he would provide it. His speech, considered a make or break moment by some within the party, was at times interrupted by hecklers. Here's our political editor, Laura Kuensberg.
A blast of fresh air? That's how KEIR Starmer wants you to see him. Labour's week's been bumpy. And he had to show today that he really is in charge. Impatient for the chance.
I've waited 17 months, 25 days and 2 hours to appear in front of you in this hall as leader of our great party.
Choosing first to confront the party's crushing defeat at the election of the project he was part of too.
To those Labour voters who said their grandparents would turn in their graves, but they couldn't trust us with high office. To those who reluctantly chose the Tories, I say these simple but powerful words. We will never, under my leadership, go into an election with a manifesto that is not a serious plan for government.
With his wife watching on, he explained how family has guided his beliefs.
My dad was a toolmaker in a factory who worked on the shop floor all his life. He gave me a deep respect for the dignity of work. And when I tell you that good work and fair growth will be the priority for a Labour government, I haven't learnt this in some political seminar. I learnt it around the kitchen table from my dad. That is why I am so proud to lead a party whose name is Labour.
But all week there has been noise here. Angst that KEIR Starmer's abandoning Jeremy Corbyn's principles. Heckles were hurled at him from the floor.
I have no regrets.
He had lines ready.
Shouting slogans or changing lives conference.
Then a new chant. He had the hall. He spoke for nearly 90 minutes. Sustenance required. With plans for mental health, insulating homes, education, technology, and a real departure from the man who used to stand on that platform. Promises on crime, praise for the military, talk of creating wealth and national pride.
In this conference hall, we are patriots.
And while he didn't say his name, there was a tribute to Tony Blair.
Education is so important I'm tempted to say it 3 times.
And
Hospital waits down.
what Labour did in power.
That's levelling up.
Power is his purpose now.
This is a big moment that demands leadership. Leadership founded on the principles that have informed my life. Work, care, equality, security. These are the tools of my trade, and with them, I will go to work. Thank you, conference.
He didn't mention Jeremy Corbyn by name. He didn't have to, because it's obvious in this hall in Brighton this week the power of the left has drained away, giving him a new sense of confidence in a changing party and a bolder voice that Labour has been desperate to hear.
It was a great speech. It showed that he cares about work and he cares about family. Absolutely smashed it. I mean, this is the KEIR STARMER that we all know.
You wanted to hear more, you wanted bolder.
But that's what I was calling for, you know, that genuine alternative.
They were delighted. The vast majority of the crowd seemed pleased, relieved maybe. Doubts on the left, though, will linger.
I didn't think that was his moment. I thought it was quite uninspiring.
Keir Starmer leaves the stage, not his party's darling, nor its hero, but perhaps having proven himself a leader. Walking taller, with a conviction to win. The leader's team more than content tonight. But the party's problems remain profound, and he can't know if the country is ready to embrace him yet. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Brighton.
Well, if Sir Keir Starmer is to win a general election for Labour, then marginal seats like Dudley North in the Midlands will be key in securing a majority. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been gauging the reaction amongst voters to his speech.
Once the heart of industrial Britain, Dudley North used to be a safe Labour seat.
I always said that Labour was for the working class. I don't know about that now, but I'll still vote Labour anyway.
But plenty here have turned away from the party. This Brexit-backing town voted Tory last time round.
I've always been Labour, but we've turned to Conservative, like Boris.
That's what the Labour leader's up against. What about Keir Starmer?
No.
Keir Starmer?
Know much about him?
No, I don't.
I believe in this country.
Keir Starmer did try to put his personality front and centre today as these students from Dudley College watched closely.
He was very articulate when he came on to him as a person. However, I'm still not as warm to him as I think I should be.
He was saying a lot of good things. I just need to know how he's going to push them through forward. I wanted to hear more about the mental health services. What about all the people that have been waiting on the waiting list for years?
It is just unacceptable that he hasn't laid out a plan that the people can really believe in.
I wanted, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to get it done. I think a lot of people are looking for that reassurance.
Yeah.
There is a lack of trust here in a community like many where people feel disconnected. That's exactly what Labour needs to overcome. But this local butcher isn't convinced Keir Starmer's yet speaking the right language.
I liked him at first, and I've become a little bit undecided.
What would you want to hear from them?
Common sense.
And the local barber?
All they can do is criticise everybody else. You get nowhere in life by just criticising and having no answer.
At the bookshop, though, there are higher expectations.
He's a good man. He's forthright, as long as the policies are direct and meaningful.
The local Labour Party is hopeful. Since heavy election losses, they've spoken to hundreds of people to find out why they turned away.
What do you make of what you're hearing from the National Labour Party at the moment? Are they saying the right things to win back places like Dudley?
Well, it's a work in progress, and I think what we've seen today and over the course of this week is some positives. What we've got to do is go out and regain the trust of the people that we wish to represent.
That is Labour's challenge, and it has to find a way back in places like this, if it's to find a way back to power. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Dudley.
The rest of the news now, and a court has heard how a police officer used COVID rules to kidnap Sarah Everard from the streets of South London in March before he raped and murdered her. Wayne Cousins, who was a serving Metropolitan Police officer, pretended to arrest the 33-year-old and was seen handcuffing her as she was walking home from a friend's house. Today, Sarah Everard's family addressed the court saying they were broken-hearted and haunted by the horror of what happened to their daughter. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning was in court.
"She was my precious little girl," said Sarah Everard's mother. "I can never talk to her, never hold her again. I am tormented at the thought of what she endured." That was at the hands of Wayne Couzens in handcuffs when he was arrested at home, telling lie after lie. He'd already kidnapped, raped, murdered and burnt Sarah. He's asked if he knows her.
Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you know where Sarah is?
No.
Right.
Sat in handcuffs and well, I know her. So you must have something to say that I know her.
As Sarah walked from her friend's house, Couzens was hunting for a victim. This, the moment of that deception. His car on the pavement, hazard lights on, he stopped Sarah. His arm outstretched, showing her his warrant card. Using his handcuffs, he arrests her. He'd previously been on COVID patrols, so knew what to say. Witnesses see Sarah with her arms behind her back, but they think it's an undercover police operation. It was kidnap. He used all the equipment and knowledge of being a police officer to do it. Couzens sat in the dock, never lifting his head. Sarah's family and friends listened to the devastating detail that is their daily reality. In the hours after kidnapping her, there was a mixture of the banal and the evil. After dumping Sarah's body in woods in Kent, he stops at Costa Coffee to get a hot chocolate. Police think he's raped and murdered Sarah by this time. He then throws Sarah's phone into a stream, later recovered by a police diver. The next day he goes to buy a green can and fills it up with petrol. He returns to the woods and burns Sarah's body in a fridge. Later, it's dumped in water. That same day, he calls the family vet as if nothing has happened.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could book my dog in for the vet so I can have a discussion about issues, please.
He goes back again to the woods for a family trip with his wife and children just days after he'd left Sarah's remains there. Sarah's family remained so dignified as they told the court about Sarah and about what they had lost. Her father and sister asked Couzens, who had his head bowed, to face them. Couzens started shaking. Mr. Everard told him Sarah was handcuffed and unable to defend herself. "This preys on my mind all the time. I can never forgive you for taking Sarah away from us. All my family want is Sarah back. You have broken our hearts." Her mother Susan said, "He treated my daughter as if she was nothing and disposed of her as if she was rubbish. In the evenings, at the time she was abducted, I let out a silent scream. 'Don't get in the car, Sarah. Don't believe him. Run.'" Her sister told Couzens, "I hate to think of her so scared and alone. I hate that I wasn't there to save her, to stop you. I want to speak to her and hug her and hear her laugh." Couzens has still never explained what exactly happened that night. A police officer betraying his uniform, a family left with no answers and without Sarah, and a woman who had her life, her future taken. When Sarah Everard was murdered, the 5 words that people used were, "She was just walking home." The prosecution suggested today that a better 5 words to describe what Couzens had done were kidnap, rape, strangulation, deception and fire. He will be sentenced tomorrow, the prosecution pointing to the fact that he behaved as if he was a police officer. They think that means he should never be released. But everyone in court today won't forget the strong emotional words from the Everard family the moment they told Couzens to face them and to face up to what he had taken from them.
Lucy Manning, thank you. The time is coming up to 6:15, our top story this evening. The Labour leader Sir KEIR Starmer promises to set out a serious plan for government in his speech at the party's conference in Brighton. And still to come, the TV personality Katie Price could face jail after pleading guilty to drink driving, driving while banned and having no insurance.
Coming up in Sports Today on the BBC News Channel, we will hear from the man bidding to become the first Briton to win a medal at the Summer and Winter Olympics, as former long jump champion Greg Rutherford sets his eye on bobsleigh glory.
The hunt for fuel has continued across large parts of Britain today, with long queues continuing to build on petrol forecourts. But the Petrol Retailers Association says there are encouraging signs that the situation is continuing to improve, with the number of petrol stations running dry falling by a half since the weekend. Our business editor Simon Jack has this report.
Upper Mill.
It's a question on millions of workers' minds. How many miles do I have left in the tank?
We've got 150 at the moment. That should see us through today.
Nurses Lindsay and Adele are heading out to see patients and can ill afford to stop to refuel.
I'm not going to be able to stop now because we've got to get to this patient as soon as possible.
And by the time they've seen their patients, it's too late.
We've managed to go past fuel stations that have queues, so we know they've got fuel, but we've been unable to get in the queue and wait because time is critical for us. By the time we've made our visits and made those patients comfortable, those fuel stations sadly have been empty.
The fuel industry and the government insist the situation is slowly improving, but the business secretary today said the army will be on our streets soon.
It takes a couple of days, sometimes a few days, to get troops on the ground. We've decided to do that, and I think in the next couple of days people will see some soldiers driving the tanker fleet.
Clearly there are still major problems about the availability of fuel, but what about prices? As you can see here, they've been rising steadily since the beginning of the year and are now at an 8-year high. The effect of this crisis comparatively small. The real reason they're rising is this. This is the global crude oil price. And the bad news is that this recent spike is yet to be reflected in pump prices. So they're expected to go even higher, even after this current crisis ends. If you add that to this horror show, this is the wholesale gas price, which has bankrupted lots of energy companies, seen millions of people facing higher bills. And we have the makings of a proper cost of living crunch this winter.
Economists are worried that mounting costs for businesses and consumers threaten to choke off an economic recovery, an unpleasant combination known as stagflation.
It's when you have stagnant or flat economic activity and accelerating prices, and it's bad news because businesses are having to raise their costs at the same time as households are actually unable to pay higher prices, so households are seeing their incomes squeezed. It's essentially the worst of both worlds.
Just this afternoon, 3 more energy companies went bust. Igloo, Enstroga and Symbio's combined 250,000 customers face higher bills from the new providers taking them on. The petrol crisis will inevitably end. The financial pressure on household incomes is arguably just starting. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Well, it's not just HGV drivers who are in short supply. There aren't enough people to work in warehouses either. Today, the retailer Next said prices would have to rise and warned deliveries may be slower in the run-up to Christmas. Our business correspondent Emma Simpson has been looking at the issue.
Picking, packing and dispatching our online shopping. These big warehouses now play a crucial role in the economy, and there are labour shortages here too. Tens of thousands of workers are already needed for full-time roles.
We have fewer workers than we used to have, and some of that is down to Brexit. So something like 15% of the HGV drivers that we had a couple of years ago were EU nationals. But the proportion for forklift truck drivers was more like 34%. If anything, warehousing has been harder hit than driving by the exodus of people from our workforce.
And now Christmas is coming. Next warned today that a lack of warehouse workers could impact deliveries. They and everyone else need an army of seasonal workers to meet demand, and pay is quickly going up.
We're seeing wages going up across the board. Nearly all of our customers we've spoken to and said if they want us to satisfy anything like their normal pre-Christmas demand, they will need to be paying more.
And this online juggernaut just upped the ante.
Here at Amazon, they're about to start recruiting for 20,000 people. And
for the first time in some areas where there's the biggest battle for workers. They'll be offering £1,000 signing on bonuses for these temps to make sure they get all their parcels out. Experts reckon there will be even more parcels this Christmas than last, and that could come at a cost.
We're seeing carriers having to look at potentially adding surcharges in terms of delivery surcharges to consumers in order to pay for the staff that they need to have on their books for this Christmas to meet that peak demand.
More people are needed than ever before in this fast-growing part of logistics. The government says it won't introduce visa schemes for any other sector facing staff shortages. The pressure's now on to deliver for Christmas. Emma Simpson, BBC News.
An off-duty nurse has been telling the inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombing that she felt helpless, lost and alone while waiting for more help to arrive. Bethany Crook was at the Ariana Grande concert with her daughter in May 2017 when a bomb was detonated in the foyer, killing 22 people. One of those she cared for was 18-year-old Georgina Callender, who died as a result of a severe head injury. She waited more than an hour to be taken to hospital. Judith Moritz is at the inquiry in Manchester. Judith.
Yes, Sophie, in the aftermath of the explosion at Manchester Arena, paramedic Paddy Ennis assessed those who were injured, and he came across Georgina Callender and classed her as the very highest priority. He said she needed to be taken away from the blast zone as quickly as possible. But she lay there for 55 minutes and she wasn't taken to hospital for more than an hour. Well, today at court, Paddy Ennis said he was sorry that she hadn't been moved sooner, and he agreed with counsel for Georgina's father that it had been unacceptable. There was emotional testimony today in court as well from Bethany Crook. Now, she had been at the concert as a concert goer with her daughter, but she was also a nurse and she put herself on duty after the explosion. But she said tearfully here in the witness box she'd had no equipment, just her two bare hands, some skills and the hope that help was coming. She said it had felt like an eternity. Help just didn't arrive, and she said she felt she had children's lives in her hands during all of that time. Well, Georgina made it to hospital, but she died later that night, and the court was told her injuries were unsurvivable. Tomorrow, the inquiry will continue the process of hearing about the individual experiences, what happened to each of the 22 people who died that night.
Judith, thank you. The UK's latest coronavirus figures showed there were 36,722 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. On average, 35,204 new cases were reported per day in the last week. 150 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average in the past week, 129 deaths were announced every day. As for vaccinations, 89.8% of people aged 16 or over have had their first jab, while 82.5% are now double vaccinated. The TV personality Katie Price has pleaded guilty to drink driving and driving while disqualified and without insurance after a crash near her home in West Sussex yesterday morning. She appeared in court at Crawley Magistrates, from where Colin Patterson reports.
Katie Price leaving court this afternoon, someone who has spent 25 years trying to get her face in the papers, for once desperate to cover up. Yesterday at around 6:20 in the morning, she crashed a BMW on a rural lane, not far from her house in Horsham. When the police arrived, she told them, "I took drugs, I should not be driving," and later tested positive for cocaine. Sitting in the dock wearing a bright pink sweatshirt, Katie Price listened as the court was told about the difficulties in her life. The fact she was so lonely, she had decided to drive to see a friend despite being banned. She pleaded guilty to drink driving, to driving without insurance and driving while disqualified.
I'm going to have to season it.
Katie Price is still a TV regular, recently on Celebrity MasterChef, nominated at the National Television Awards, and on Monday appeared on Good Morning Britain, talking about how her 2-year driving ban was making seeing her disabled son Harvey very difficult.
So I can't just whiz in the car down there and it's not close.
and she could yet face jail time. Sentencing has been deferred until the 15th of December on the condition that she seeks treatment at the Priory Centre and works with the probation services to try and turn her life around. Colin Patterson, BBC News, Crawley.
For the first time in history, a public statue honouring a real-life woman has been unveiled in Wales. Betty Campbell became the first black head teacher at a Welsh school in the 1970s. As a schoolgirl in Cardiff, she was told that being black and working class would prevent her from achieving her ambition. Today, a monument honouring her and what she did for multicultural education was unveiled in Cardiff. Hal Griffiths reports.
History uncovered. Betty Campbell's life was in itself a lesson in how the power of education and determination can combine. As Wales's first ever black head teacher, she worked in Cardiff's deprived Docklands, refusing to accept that race or gender should define a child's life.
I went out to the headmistress and told her that I wanted to be a teacher, and she said, "Oh, get the idea out of your head right away. You'd have insurmountable problems." And even at that tender age of 15, I knew that she meant, if you're black, that's your lot.
She was the first to make black history part of the curriculum. The community looked to her to lead.
If Nan said she was going to do something, she absolutely was going to do it. And I think that worked in her favour when it came to kind of just trying to support the community, whether it was kind of, I don't know, some additional resources or some additional funding. She absolutely went away and did it.
Incredibly, this is the first and only monument for a real-life woman in Wales.
Who we celebrate with statues, how and where we commemorate them isn't set in stone. The future of over 200 monuments and street names just in Wales is under review because of their links to the slave trade.
In another part of Cardiff, this statue of slave owner Sir Thomas Picton has been removed from view, but not from the building. New statues are a way to change the narrative.
It's redressing the wrongs of the past, but it's also telling a new story, which is the story of a multicultural Britain, multicultural Wales, and a long history of Wales that has been kind of not suppressed, but kind of forgotten.
Betty Campbell's statue is the first of 5 female figures being raised around Wales. Signs of a slow but monumental change. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff.
Now, a big moment in our studio tonight. For the first time since March 2020, a weather presenter is back. Ben, welcome.
I found the way, Sophie.
It's been rather lonely without you in here.
I managed to remember, and actually it looks like quite a promising welcome back, doesn't it? Because it's not been a bad day today. We've had some showers around, yes, but some sunshine as well. A beautiful end to the day there in Worthing. However, what is coming up doesn't look quite so pretty because we will see some spells of rain. It will often be windy over the next few days. Still some of those drier, brighter interludes. So mainly fine out there at the moment. Daytime showers fading, but you can see behind me cloud and rain spreading from the west overnight. Ahead of that, where we hold on to clear skies in eastern areas, it will turn quite chilly, maybe all the way down to freezing across parts of northeast Scotland. Milder out west with the cloud, with the rain and quite a brisk wind. It'll be a particularly windy start to the day in western Scotland tomorrow, gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour. Through the day, we'll see cloud and outbreaks of rain on and off, moving quite erratically southwards and eastwards. Some drier and perhaps brighter spells. The best of any brightness for northeast Scotland, maybe the far southeast of England. The winds will ease a little, but it will stay blustery. Temperatures may be up just a degree or so on today's values, 13 to 17 degrees. But low pressure is firmly in charge of the scene as we move on into Friday. One weather front sweeping eastwards. That'll bring some early rain across eastern and southern parts of England. That will clear away though. We get another brighter interlude for England and Wales, but not so for Scotland or for Northern Ireland. Showers or longer spells of rain here. A very windy day across parts of Scotland, particularly 11 to 17 degrees. And then what about the weekend? You may not want to see this if you have outdoor plans. Low pressure very much with us, but this frontal system working in from the west could well spin up into a really deep low by the time we get to Sunday, and that could bring gales in places. So there's certainly the risk of some very strong winds through the weekend and some pretty heavy bursts of rain at times as well. Sorry it's not better news, Sophie.
Very nice to have you back. Ben, thank you. A reminder now of our main story this evening. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer promises to set out a serious plan for government in his speech at the party's conference in Brighton. That's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.